Good morning, folks. Playing at the casting bench a little bit today, and I'm working on a match plate. So I thought you might like to see how I set up a match plate. And this is a really simple match plate. This is going to be for some flask hardware, and I'll go into that a little bit about what I'm changing and what I'm doing. So I do quite a bit with match plates, and today throughout the day I'm just going to start and stop video and kind of show you where I'm at, because I'm out here at the casting bench. It's bright outside, and it's one of those, it's Saturday morning, and it's one of those days, I can't get a haircut because there's nobody that's cutting hair right now, and I'm too lazy to shave and all that good stuff. But anyway, so I'm playing out here. So we're not going to worry about background noise. We're not going to do. This is a match plate that I've had before, or that I built quite a while ago. It's showing a lot of wear, and it still needs a little bit of modification. Now, this is the flask hardware that I've been using on my bigger flasks that you've seen, or on my fancier snap flasks. And there's a whole lot of things that are good and bad about those, and a whole lot of things that I'm going to change. This I consider obsolete. Now, this is Steve Chastain's design for flask hardware that's in his books, and the same way with the snap flasks. I'm using those. Before too long, I'll do some stuff on flasks, because I'm going to build some new flasks, and this is not the design that I really recommend. There's part of it that I do like about it, and I will continue to use this because I've still got, 2 or 3 flasks that I don't have hardware on. Those were designed as snap flasks, and at least one of them I've converted to not be a snap flask. It's got the hinges on the back side, but it's not, and it's because it's a huge box. I mean, it's set up. What I actually built that one for was primarily for the gearbox for his Muller design, and it's a pretty big pattern that goes in there. So that's actually why I built that. It's way too big to operate as a snap flask. When I get to molding those, I'm probably going to have to add some gaggers in there and some support bars because it's just too big a flask, and there's too much sand in there, and it's probably more than I can handle by myself. So we're going to discuss that and tackle that at some later date. For flask hardware, what I'm doing is I'm building a match plate off of a design by old Foundry man down in Australia, and I found him to be a tremendous resource. And if you haven't seen his videos, look him up and go down and watch some of those, because for casting stuff, he's very knowledgeable. For small production stuff and aluminum, I've actually learned a lot from him, and I'm trying some of his ideas that I think make sense that I hadn't thought about. And there again, as I come across those, I'll go over those with you. But anyway, I'm building flask hardware that goes on, and we'll have pins run up through. And I've got 4 of these. I've got 2 in this size, and then 2 narrower ones that I'm going to run in this match plate. So as we get to doing it, I'll just show you the process as I go through. Now, for this flask, and let me move the camera down. Smaller flasks that I've got there, again, Steve Chastain's hardware on these. This works well. It's big and clunky. The flasks themselves, these are about 1.1 inch thick, and it's too much flask for the size. We don't need that much. It works well when you get them tuned right. They're pretty good, smooth flasks. There's several things I don't like about it. And like I say, when we get there, we'll cover that. But these are designed after his snap flasks here. And of course, if you don't know what a snap flask is, why you pop these snaps open, you can take it off, leave your sand mold, and you can cast several in the same box. So as you can tell from looking at mine, I don't always use them as a snap flask. Actually, I very rarely use them as a snap flask, so I've got burn marks and things like that. So anyway, I'll go over all that when we get that far. For match plates, I've cut a whole bunch of these. I'm down to my last 2 or 3. And I go ahead and set them up so that they sit on the pattern, or on the box pins. And I did, I don't know, 8 or 10 of these plates, whatever. I probably cut a sheet of plywood out of these. And I've gone ahead and set them all up to fit this molding box. So they've already got the aluminum inserts in for alignment. Cast vibrators that I make in-house, I've got them on virtually all my flasks, or all my match plates, because I don't like to change them. So that's a project. I actually got these mounted up on a match plate themselves to cast them. So they go fairly quickly. One of the changes I'm going to make, and I'll do it off camera right now, is I'm going to cut out this match plate here, and I'm going to set the match plate vibrator farther back in here. I don't want it to interfere with the flask, of course, but I want to get it closer in here so it's not hanging out here in space. I think it'll balance the match plate a little bit better and just be a little more inobtrusive. When I'm molding here at the bench, why they tend to be in the way when they're sticking out here like this. I don't have a big enough bench and a big enough sand bin to where it kind of gets in the way. So the first thing I'm going to do before I even get started, after we finish this little discussion about these plates, is I'm going to take it back and cut it out, set it back in there. We're going to see how it works on this plate. Now when I set these all up, why I go ahead and I mark out where the inside of the flask sets, and then these cutouts where the bottom of the flask is. So I got a good idea of the layout, how much room I've got in that. Now I've already gone back, found the center of these, and laid out the way I'm going to set these in. And it's going to be just like this. So I've set for my sprue, I'm going to feed right off of the middle. And one of the things that I took from old Foundry man, and I don't have it out here, is I've turned a smaller tapered screw. And I've got a little nail in the end of it that's going to sit right back into the hole. I center drilled it through so that on the bottom side I can put my feeders. That's where my runners will be to feed. And I'm going to feed off of both sides here. I'll run it beyond, or probably about to the end of this pattern on both sides, and then I'll feed it in, probably not quite center, probably a little bit closer to this side so it has an overrun, and then it'll feed back in. Now this may be a mistake feeding it this way. I'm going to see if I can cast these without venting them or anything else, and all we're going to do is put a feeder in. I'm not going to put a riser in at this point in time. If I have to do that, we'll go back and add risers. We'll just see how it works. You know, I don't know. It's kind of tight getting 4 of these in, although I think actually there's plenty of room to get them in on this plate, and we'll see. Now, if I was doing it over again, and it took probably a little over 20 hours to print these on the 3D printer, and that's one of the advantages of the 3D printer. When I initially set this up in Fusion 360, this is what I was going for, and I missed a dimension, so I ended up with more spacing in here. I think I've got about another ½ inch of width and everything. It's fine. It'll work fine on these patterns, or on these molding boxes. They're the same thickness as the other flask hardware I've been using. But I think on these smaller flasks, I could have gotten by with this one right here. There again, I think these are going to cast fast enough out of this match plate that I'm not going to be concerned about it if I need to mix and match them. My initial thought with doing it this way is I've got these I'll put on the bottom half of the flask that will hold the pins, and these I'll put in the cope up on top, a little bit narrower. I think it's more ergonomic for me to lift them off the match plate. I like the closer spacing. It seems like it's a little bit easier to get a hold of them and be able to put my thumb on the pin and lift it off. I think I'll use old Foundry man's idea. One side will be drilled and reamed, and the other side will be, it'll be drilled and reamed too, but then it'll be notched out. So we're only actually aligning this way on one pin that's got the hole through it, and the other pin holds side to side. So a little bit of difference in flask dimensions will be able to be accomplished by that. I set these up with the idea that I can put 3/4 inch pins in here. Steve Chastain's hardware has 1 inch pins. It's awful big, they're awful heavy by the time you get all the hardware in there, and that's one of my complaints, is even on these smaller flasks, why they get pretty heavy with this heavier hardware and all the other crap we're putting on them, snaps and hinges and everything. So we've added quite a bit of weight by doing that. So my idea is that this will accept 3/4 inch hardware, which I think on intermediate to even larger size flasks will be plenty. But I think since I'm going to mount them on a wooden flask, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with probably a ½ inch pin, especially on a flask of this size. Then if I burn up a wooden flask, if I have to change hardware, if they swell, shrink, whatever the case may be, I can go back and I can open these up to 5/8 and then maybe 3/4 if necessary. So half, 9/16, 5/8, you know, just open them up, increment. Okay, I think that vibrator might be quite a bit nicer tucked in there a little bit closer. But, kind of balances a little bit better. So we'll smooth that up and check everything once we get it set in. Normally I put a coat of shellac on everything. I'm out of shellac, and you know, under quarantine here, I'm not going out to doing anything. Everything I'm doing is pretty much with stuff that I've got in-house to use. You know, I've got a bunch of little projects that I've worked on for the Foundry stuff the last couple of days that I haven't really showed. But I'll show little bits of that, but that's all built out of scrap, out of my scrap pile and things. So anyway, I'm just going to take, let's see, rather than put the patterns themselves on, I think I'm going to go ahead and gate the other side. I drilled it right through the center, which I drilled it before, and that shows the center of it on this side, we can use this to hold it all at rocks, so it's flat. So that's where we're going to put our pouring basin, or our pouring gate. And I've done this all a little bit differently. I've gone to smaller gating. Times past, the general consensus has always been we use great big sprues, we use great big risers, and run as much metal through as fast as we can. There again, looking at some of the other stuff that's out there, why we're going to smaller sprues, and I've gone to a taper sprue on this one, or that's what I'm going to try on this one. We'll see how it feeds and how it works. I'm not going to gate it nearly as heavy. I've gone a little bit deeper for a pouring basin here, and there's nothing spectacular about that. It's just I'm putting it right there in the bottom of the basin. It'll drop to the bottom. I'm going to take dowels and run them on both sides, and I've outlined the bases of those hardware patterns. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut some dowel a little bit shorter than full length, and I'm going to sand them down to half thickness. We'll taper them down on the end, and we're going to glue them down, and I'm just going to super glue stuff in. So I'm you know, there's nothing spectacular about this. We're going to need two of them that run about that long, I guess. We'll make them both the same, one for either side. We could make the other one a little bit longer, I guess, since we've got a little bit longer piece there, but I don't think it really matters. So I'm going to go cut those, sand them, and we'll start gluing stuff down. That's way overkill there, I think, and that may actually cause more turbulence. But I'm going to let that sit and cure for a few minutes, then I'm just going to take some rough sandpaper, go ahead and contour the tops, and we'll put a little filler on there to fill it in. And then that will be functional now. Like I say, I would normally put a coat of shellac on this. I've got a little bit of primer surfacer that I may spray onto these just to cover up some of these. I've lightly sanded the patterns themselves, but they're still awful rough. I may have trouble getting a draw out of those, but we'll try it and see. You know, over time, I'm sure they get smooth a little bit as they're worked in the sand, but also we'll go back and we'll put a coat of finish on these, both to protect them, to protect the wood and everything. But I'm anxious to cast a couple of castings and just see how they're going to come out. I'm having a lot of fun developing new patterns, so we'll see. I've got some cool stuff on the drawing board already that we've laid out for the little Atlas machines especially. But this is kind of shop stuff, so we'll let this cure for a little bit, and we'll come back and sand it. Okay, I think that's ready for a little pour. Go ahead and set up the other side while we're here. A lot of times these need to be mechanically affixed. I don't think I'm going to worry about it quite yet anyway. I think maybe we've got enough. By the time we put a little Bondo around the edge of it to smooth those edges out, why that will help seal it a little bit too, or help adhere it there to the plate. And that's probably all that's really necessary on this pattern. There's no real stress on them. Now, one one of these patterns, this last one, well, it's got a big edge that's lifted on the bottom corner of it that we'll fill in with filler. So we'll let those set for a few minutes, and I'll get out some stuff for some filler. Alright, well, here's what we look like with initial sand. I'm going to hit it with about some 150, 220, something like that, just to smooth the blends down just a little bit more. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit it with a little bit of primer surfacer. I think I've got enough to put a light coat on this. And I'm going to go ahead and try and cast out of this the way it is. I'm going to put one more coat of Bondo on my runners on the back side. I'll smooth that up, but I'll do that off camera. You know, you see how we're doing that. And I'm not nearly as concerned with the importance of this on this side of the match plate at this point in time. As time goes on, we'll get the whole thing finished and get them smoothed out and any little holes filled. But if we get some tear out on the back side on the runners, I'm not concerned about it. Just to try out a new pattern. So anyway, a little bit more work. We'll hit it with some surfacer offline here, or off camera, and then we'll take a look at it. And we'll see if we can't get one rammed up. Well, here's our match plate to this point in time. Run backwards. I got a little primer on here, a couple coats. I've got it sanded until I ran out of primer. This is still, we got quite a few ridges I can feel through the, where 3D printed. And it's going to need a little more work. And this side's still rough. We got a second coat of Bondo on it. Knock the big nubbins off. I'm going to go ahead and ram up a pattern out of this just to see how it turns out. If it turns out, we may do a couple of these since we've got these set up on this snap flask, which I just told you I don't recommend. But we'll ram it up and see what we come up with and decide if we can run a couple of castings today. Anyway, that goes on there like that. Top half of the pattern goes on like that. And we start by ramming up the other side, the bottom side, the drag, and see what we come up with. So let me get my bench opened up and we'll ram this pattern up. That's what we want. Lots of parting on that one. That's rough enough that we'll want as much part in there as we can get. Guess we could bring this up just a little bit, couldn't we? A little bit better view. Okay. This is our little tapered sprue, so we'll try and see how that's going to work out for us. I've left a little pin in there. I guess we're still going to have to hold it. It's all right. There again, a little bit rough. Normally I would say that I need to brush that part off of there, all that parting compound. But since we're so rough on the pattern yet, I think we'll go ahead and leave it alone. Okay, one of the things that I quite honestly don't like about this hardware is when you ram them up like this and you end up with, you've packed sand down through all of these little cracks and crevices. So I'm hoping the other style of flask hardware will minimize that anyway, because that's one of the things I don't like about it. It holds pretty good alignment. They're you have to adjust them and everything, but they are adjustable, so they work pretty well. So anyway, that's one of the reasons I'm changing hardware. So I think I will run one of the little risers on here, that we ram up in one of these. I am kind of concerned that this is going to fill. I'm going to try and get away without venting it on this one anyway. I'm not going to vent it. I'm not going to do anything if we get a decent pull out of here. So let's go ahead, pull it off, and see what we come up with. I don't know if we'll get anything good or not. Need to move my knee valve around a little bit. Here we go. Well, that looks really good. That looks really, really good. I think other than to lightly blow that out, I'm going to do nothing to this pattern. I think we'll go ahead and set up blow it out. We'll set up the little casting floor that I've got, and then we're going to go ahead and try and pour this. Because that doesn't look bad. I've got just a little bit of tear out here, and a few little places along the edge that are an indication that yes, it does need to be finished out a little bit more. The match plate, but all in all, that looks really good. I'm going to leave it right there. Okay, well, that one's done. I'm going to go ahead and set up the pouring floor, and I think we may do one more of these. I think we'll try and operate this as a snap flask just to see how it works. In for a dime, in for a dollar today. So I'll bring you back in a few minutes.
What I've done is I've got 4 molds set in here, and I went ahead and rammed up 3 of those match plates with the flask hardware on them. So, and I ran them in that snap flask, so we'll see how that works. I've got them weighted just with whatever I had here. I could add some weight to hopefully help them not leak, which is always a problem with these, especially in these smaller flasks. If you start cutting stuff or your pattern's too close to the edge, why it just won't hold the sand. You're going to blow out there. So anyway, I've got 3 molds. These first 2 are just the way I did the first mold. The third one over there is the same thing, except I vented it. Now I said I was going to have to do a little bit more work to that pattern on at least the second and third, and I believe the first one too. There's a little bit of fallout right on one side of one of those patterns, and it's just a little bit rough right there. It's holding the sand both up on the top of the base and right at the base. So not a big issue. I'm going to have to make that adjustment to them, and as that match plate gets smoothed out and modified a little bit as necessary and finish put on it, why that'll take care of that problem. But that's the only thing I anticipate being an issue with any of those. The fourth one is just a hubcap for on the sand muller project, and I had a pattern here that I knew I needed another hubcap for, so we just threw one in just to do it. So we're going to let her melt. We probably got another 10 minutes or so before it's actually ready to pour. Always turn off your gas first. That way it blows any gas that's left in it. The blower will blow it on out. And if you've got it up to temperature, it's going to be fine. We've already fluxed it and degassed it. Blowout. That's why I don't like snap flasks. That one looks like it's going to hold. That one blew out. Yep. That's why I don't like a snap flask. Yeah. I don't mind taking time to build good wooden flasks and stuff, but the problems with those snap flasks for the small home foundry, I found they just blow out. You know, they don't hold up nearly as well, or they don't hold material nearly as well. We try and run them, you know, which would normally there'd be lots of material around to support them, but when we do a snap flask and release it, why there's not enough material there. So it burns up our bottom boards, burns up our flasks. Not everything it's cracked up to be. Okay, so there we go. We'll let that set for a few minutes, then we'll pop those out and see what they look like. Okay, well, let's open up a couple of these blown out castings, or blown out molds, and see what they look like. So if we take the first one,
Let's see if we can. Oh, maybe the wrong way to do this with the camera and everything. Okay, here's the blowout on the first one on the side. So let me get a pair of gloves so that I can pull that sprue out. See what that looks like. Burn up those good follower boards. These boards work really well. They take a little extra time and money to make, but a couple of thicknesses are better. Plus the runners on the bottom, you don't pinch your fingers when you set them down. Yeah, these didn't fill. Back into the pot with those. See what number 2 looks like. Now this one held together, so this should be hopefully a good one. I know the suspense is killing you. There they are. Those are really good. This is the one right here that I had a little fallout, right on that edge and down on this bottom edge. But those will work well. We've got our markings for where to drill our holes. Our 4 holes are already indexed. We don't have to do any measuring. All we got to do is run a drill down through there in the countersink, and then we'll set them on a flask and then machine them. So I think that'll make a real nice set of flask hardware. But we will not be using snap flasks. We'll be using solid flasks for these, and that's probably all I'll build is solid flasks. I'm much better off to build 3 or 4 solid flasks in the same size and mold them up that way than I am using a snap flask, one snap flask or a couple of snap flasks, and then having to mold them 2 or 3 times because I have blowouts on them. In an industrial setting where they're set up, they know exactly what they're doing, they're running off of a jolt machine or something like that, they probably work real well. But for the home shop, I'm not real impressed with them. This was the other blowout. I don't expect anything out of it. Nope. No, we got a big shrink cavity in that one on both of those. Yeah. Yeah. None of those are going to do what we want to do. So 2 out of 3 using a snap flask are a failure. We don't need to do that anymore. The last one was a conventional flask, and it was just that hubcap. So I'm going to say this one's going to. I'm going to be optimistic and say this one's going to come out fine. We'll be changing out these. I've been using these just recently for risers and sprue extensions, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Yeah, there's the bottom of that hubcap. That looks like it's probably going to be fine, which I expect it to be. fall out on this side, on the outside there. Yeah, that's a good one. We got no problems there. Yep. There's a hubcap for the sand molar. So we got 2 out of 4 good ones. So there we go. That's the day's casting session. Hopefully you found something a little bit interesting or intriguing there. And now you know my disdain for snap flasks, even though I've got 6 or 8 of them that I've made. So, and hardware for several more, but neither here nor there. That's the day's castings. Tomorrow we'll clean these up a little bit probably, and I've got a couple of little things that I may want to share with you tomorrow. We'll see how the day goes. So I've got to get back to machining Atlas castings for the index centers for the mill, and I was going to do that here yesterday, and I, in all honesty, just didn't feel like it, so we didn't do anything there, and that's kind of what's happening. So hopefully here in the washed out sun you found something a little bit interesting, and hope you're all staying tucked in and safe and everybody's well. And as always, thanks for taking the time to watch, guys.